name is Holly Dagris, and I'm your guest host today for Vital Voices live from Davos. Just a little bit about me before we begin. I am a senior fellow at the US-based think tank called the Washington Institute and curator of the Iranist newsletter. And here I have with me...
Hi, I'm Masa Ali Radani. I am the Associate Director for Technology Threats and Opportunities at the human rights organization Witness that focuses on the uses of technology for human rights documentation.
And I'm Bahar Kandahari from the Center for Human Rights in Iran. I lead the advocacy and research team.
And I think it's important to emphasize that we are all of Iranian heritage and at one point of our life have lived in Iran. And we're here to talk about the bravery of the Iranian people for the past few weeks. If you haven't been watching the news, on December 28th, there was an anti-regime uprising inside Iran. And for the past 2 weeks now, there's been a communication shutdown. And unfortunately, under the dark cover of that blackout, security forces brutally massacred tens of thousands of Iranians. And I'm hoping we can get into that detail momentarily. But first, I want to ask, have you guys heard from your families and friends in Iran, Bahar?
It's been very difficult because of the ongoing communications blackout. There has been some trickles of communications coming back, like through landlines, for example. So I have received some calls from Iran through landlines, which last very like 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and they're very unsafe, so they can't really tell you what's happening. So they just say, "Hi, I'm alive," and that's it. You can't really talk about anything else. But no, the majority of my family and friends are still in a blackout. Yeah.
And just to emphasize on that, the Islamic Republic had cut landlines and the internet. And so we are right now unable to call our families. They can only call us. And unfortunately, they charge exuberant amounts of money for these Iranian families and friends to call us right now. I heard from one family out of several. And basically with the same message, right now when we open our family group chats or even individual ones, they're just a one check mark on WhatsApp. Massa, what about you?
It's interesting because I was at Cloudflare House earlier and they were showing me just spots of connectivity because they monitor the network in Iran. And actually, while I was there, I've been opening one of my family group chats every day to see who's been able to read the messages we've been sending there. And one family member who I hadn't been able to hear from actually sent a message saying that they were at a friend's house who managed to find some connectivity. And it's been very strange, and apologies if I get very technical because this is what I follow. But it's a very sophisticated operation, the internet shutdown that's happening. And it's far more sophisticated than it was in 2019. But you can also see that they're experimenting with the network. So, for example, on Sunday, there was a brief moment. I had a friend I hadn't heard from in a long time, but somehow they managed to connect. And they immediately went on Instagram to post an update for everyone because they had to reply to many people. And of course, like within, I think, an hour, they had lost their connection. So I haven't heard back from them. They had it was a very disheartening update. Like, they were safe personally, but they were saying that they were pretty much changed forever by the nightmare that they were seeing around them or had seen around them in Tehran. So it really brought shivers seeing that update. And it's been a lot. And I mean, I think it's been a lot for all of us, hasn't it, following this situation?
Yeah, it really has. And for us working on Iran personally, we really haven't had a chance to process because it's been go, go, go. And there's been moments where, I mean, personally, I saw a friend the other day and I started crying out of the blue. And so it's just, we haven't really had a moment. It's been, and I just want to explain, the information we're getting out of Iran is just a sliver, like so small. And so imagine how horrific those images and videos we're seeing in the media from the bravery of Iranians sharing them for the moment they have that little connection, but also because there's Starlink in Iran, because Iranians have been smuggling in kits. There's about 50 to 60,000 users, and they're doing whatever they can because internet and social media are the only way for Iranian voices to be heard. But I want to shift a bit and have you, Bahar, through your work at your organization, like tell us about the crackdown. What are the numbers exactly? Break them down for us. Tell us a bit about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, just so the audience understands.
Yeah. So what we have seen in the past few days has been a massacre. 12,000 people have been, actually the numbers are rising. 14,000 people have been recorded dead by the Hirana organization, the Hirana Human Rights Organization, and CBS has also reported possibly as high as 20,000. So the numbers are shifting and rising every single day. But this has been the worst state crackdown on protesters that Iran has ever seen in its modern history. And 26,000 people have been arrested within just a few days. And this number is very high. Like, for example, for the Women Life Freedom Movement, that was like a 12 months ongoing protest. And the number was not even as high as this that we were seeing. The numbers are extremely high because they happened within like 2-3 days, basically. And the arrests are especially ongoing, especially for injured protesters. We are receiving reports that state security forces are going to houses, raiding houses, and looking at bodies of people to see if they have been shot or not, and that would be a sign that they were at a protest, and they're arresting them. So the numbers are extremely high, and with regards to the 26,000 people arrested, their situation is very alarming because we have no information about where they are, what are the charges they're facing, what are their conditions. But what we do know is that 176 forced confessions have been televised so far, and that is a very high number of televised forced confessions within just a few days. And these are forced confessions that are routinely used as the sole evidence to prosecute protesters and fabricate charges against them and give them harsh sentences such as the death penalty. So all of these protesters who have been detained are at extreme risk of receiving death sentences, and the risk of executions unleashing in the next few weeks or months are very high. So eyes really need to be on Iran right now and on the protesters that are kind of, you could say, forcibly disappeared right now because we don't know where they are and what's happening to them.
And just to emphasize, last year, the year 2025, we had the highest executions in the Islamic Republic of Iran since 1989, and that was 2,045. And that is basically what they're trying to do there. They use it as a tool to silence dissent. And so when we talk about these numbers, maybe we can talk a little bit about what that means in this moment. Where do they plan to take this? Because we are still in a communication shutdown, so maybe you can elaborate on that too.
I do want to add that in regards to executions, we haven't seen political executions yet, but the executions that happen every day are still happening. In January so far, I think over 100 people have been executed, and we're not even at the end of January yet, and that's for cases such as drug charges that don't even meet the threshold for death penalty. So Iran's judiciary is not an actual judicial process. All of these people who go through the courthouses are, no matter if you're a political prisoner or any individual, you're not actually being given your due process. And now in regards to the detained protesters, when the streets quiet down, the executions start, and that is a way for the regime to terrorize the population and tell them, look, if you come back out to the streets, this will be what you will be facing, executions. And we have seen that in the past. And in regards to the charges that they might be facing, we are seeing that when families go to identify bodies, for example, right now. We have seen footages of a morgue in Tehran where bodies are piled up and families are going through rows of body bags to identify their loved ones. And at the end, when I do find their loved one in the piles of bodies, they're not even able to take the body with them and bury their loved one. They have to pay huge sums of money, or they have to sign an agreement saying our loved one was not a protester and he or she was a member of the Basij state force, which is a tactic that the state uses to inflate the number of state casualties, and then these state casualties are used as fabricated charges against detained protesters to give them death penalty cases. So with this ongoing patterns that we were seeing with the televised confessions and the forced agreements of being a Basij, not a protester, the risk of death penalty charges increasing are extremely high too.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, just to cover like more about the, some of the horrific stories coming out of Iran, like people have described the massacre as a war zone. And it's not just one city, it's numerous cities, even including the holiest city in Iran, Mashhad in the northeast. And in Tehran, in the largest cemetery, Behesht Zahra, which translates as Zahra's paradise, people were saying that they had run out of, they were handing out free burial plots and they had run out of body bags because there were so many deaths, and that they were using index finger scanners and moving quickly just to identify and just process things because that's how many people had been killed. Masa, I want to talk to you a bit because, you know, this has been a very murky space right now in terms of documentation efforts. And you just wrote a piece in The Atlantic about that. And I would hope you can maybe elaborate more about what you said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just listening, and I'm so grateful for the work that Bahar and all the other folks at various different human rights documentation organizations are doing, because like these are not just numbers; these are very harrowing stories. So I just want to put my respect and appreciation for you and colleagues out there, and of course the brave Iranian people who are living through this. But like, talking and having a lot of colleagues doing documentation work, it is very difficult because for the past 47 years, the Islamic Republic has wanted to represent the authentic voice of Iranians and has basically smeared dissidents and activism under various labels, CIA, Israeli plot, etc., etc. And so these authentic efforts and civil society movements have been repressed for years. And of course, with the age of the internet and now the age of AI, the space has really changed. And at my team at Witness, we do a lot of work trying to understand deepfakes and AI manipulation and content authenticity. And so I was hearing, as the protests started, there was a lot of rumors dismissing certain footage that was coming out, like these crowds aren't real, these chants aren't real, this is all AI or AI manipulation. And so it was very murky, and that's why I did a deep dive for this Atlantic piece, which is to look at the various different content that was going viral. And it's interesting how the regime is really manipulating this age of AI and, you know, a lot of hype around AI slop to try to help them dismiss even further in this new age authentic voices and authentic content. And so one really interesting example from early on in the protests was this viral image known now as Tank Man. So this was the label that that very iconic symbolic image from Tiananmen Square in 1989 was of, you know, a man standing in front of a military tank. This one was a protester in Tehran standing in front of a crowd of what looks to be Basij security forces with weapons. And motorcycles, on motorcycles. Yeah, very brave, symbolic photo. Of course, this was captured from someone in an apartment complex up above, and they had zoomed. It was extremely blurry video. And so someone took a screen grab of this and used AI editing to enhance the image so it could be shared. And a lot of people don't know a lot of the editing software these days incorporates AI. And so this was immediately picked up, and people identified various different, you know, artifacts that indicated that this real image had some AI use in it. And so suddenly it became this viral thing shared by many different what looked to be regime accounts or pro-regime accounts, that this is all AI slop. All of this protest footage, this is all fake. This is made up. It's a foreign plot, and they're using AI to do this. And it was really interesting as well with some of the footage of the chants. And because Iran doesn't have free media, you don't have access to polling. Like I said, the regime wants to represent the true voice of Iranians. Oftentimes you turn to protest footage to see chants from crowds to actually understand what some of the authentic sentiments of Iranian people are. And so various different videos were coming out of large crowds, different chants against the regime. One thing that has really become popular are the chants for the return of the monarchy in Iran. And of course, there has been kind of a surge of effort by the former crown prince, Reza Pahlavi. And so this became a chant that was documented. And of course, a rumor immediately started that these were fake chants. And so I was very interested, just wanting to know, is it true? Is this manipulated? And it was interesting to find different accounts that had various different opposition identities. Like there was one account that alleged they were MEK. MEK is one of these, it's a controversial militant opposition group. And it was, saying here's the real video and here's the manipulated video, but there was no other instance of this occurring. So they had created the accusation that the monarchists had manipulated a piece of footage, when in reality it was that account. And immediately, within an hour that this allegedly MEK account had posted it, regime accounts automatically started reposting it and starting this narrative. And so we also have this thing within Iranian social media known as cyberies, which are regime accounts that pretend to be opposition to create chaos. And it's been their tactic to ensure that civil society and unity in opposition is always fragmented and chaotic. And so it was interesting to see this in action with that example.
I think it would be useful for me to add some color about the calls for the return of the Pahlavi dynasty. So, former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has offered himself as an opposition or a transitional figure. And he has an institutional legacy and real calls from the streets. And that was what was extraordinary, is there were over a dozen anti-regime chants during the protest, and 3 of them were focused on the Pahlavi dynasty. One was "Long live the Shah," the other one was "This is the final battle, Pahlavi will return," and "Reza Shah, may your soul be blessed," who's the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty. And so a lot of Iranians see this as the antithesis to the Islamic Republic, and they've come to recognize that because of the brutality of the Islamic Republic for 47 years, and even though there's been calls for a transition from within, from activists, but they've been repressed so much, they realize that that they have to look outwards more for possibilities. Some Iranians have been looking in that direction, and that's why you're seeing a lot more of these calls for the former crown prince. But I want to pivot a bit to where things are at now. Obviously, we're here in Davos. I think it's important to note that the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was actually invited to the World Economic Forum, and thankfully the Iranian diaspora stepped up and was able to get him kicked off or kicked out of Davos this year. And I want to turn to you, Bahar, for a moment and talk a bit more about what the international community should be doing in this moment, because I'm an Iran analyst. I've been doing this for over a decade, and the Islamic Republic has crossed the threshold of no return, and I really think we can't look at it the same way after this massacre. The trust of the Iranian people has been broken with the Islamic Republic. They lost the, excuse me, the trust of the Iranian people has been lost for a really long time, but after this, it's been permanently broken and severed. And I think that we as the international community with the tools have to acknowledge that. So Bahar, if you can explain a bit about more about what they can do at this juncture, that would be helpful.
Sure. Um, I think from your example of Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, being here, I think that's a good example that we cannot go back to business as usual. Like days after his government massacred, slaughtered thousands of civilians, he should not have been invited to this forum in the first place. And that's a very good example of what Iranians are demanding right now, that we cannot go back to business as usual. International community should stop giving their killers a platform, international platforms. And there are so many concrete actions the international community can take. They can recall ambassadors from Tehran and downgrade diplomatic relations. They can freeze assets of Iranian officials, deny visas to Iranian officials and their families. A lot of children are abroad, studying abroad, while Iranians who are trying to flee, they can't even get a visa. Use universal jurisdiction to hold them accountable, criminally accountable, so they fear using violence because of accountability. And because of my work documentation, the most urgent need right now is internet. And that's something that governments and tech companies can work together and urgently do something so we can actually see what's happening inside the country. I've interviewed so many people, and I talked to a doctor who recently left Iran, and he said, what you are seeing is not even the tip of the iceberg. And what a lot of the footages that we are seeing and coming out of Iran right now, they're mostly from Tehran and urban cities like Mashhad. We're not seeing what's happening in the outer provinces, the small cities, the marginalized communities who might not have access to Starlink. So when the internet comes back, we expect to see a lot of horrors, and that we need the internet right now. So if Araghchi can write an op-ed in the Guardian and the Wall Street Journal, then Iranians need to have access to internet to actually say what's happening from their perspective as well. And I think MASA will be able to tap into what's the urgent internet action that the international community can take. And another call that a lot of Iranians have recently been calling for is outside help. And a lot of Iranians, including Nobel Peace Laureate Shirin Ebadi, have been calling for this principle of responsibility to protect, which is an international principle which basically means that foreign states need to step in when a government is basically failing to protect its own citizens. And there are 4 categories of crimes which this responsibility falls under, and crimes against humanity is one of them. And the massacres we're seeing in Iran reach that level of crimes against humanity. And the UN Special Rapporteur has also said that the crimes we're seeing reach that level of crimes against humanity. So that's the right to protect, responsibility to protect is something that a lot of Iranians are asking right now for international community to not just put out statements, but to actually take concrete actions to stop the government from carrying out massacres. And I think this is the moment of reckoning to see if the international community is once again going to move on when the streets are quiet because they killed so many people that people are really just scared to come out again. The international community cannot move on just because the people cannot step outside their homes. This is a moment where we have to actually say no more, you know? We cannot go back to business as usual. And this is not just for Iran, but also for the region, where the Islamic Republic spends billions of dollars to massacre civilians in neighboring countries such as Syria, Iraq, Yemen. We have seen this even in Latin America. Instead of spending that billions of dollars at home building infrastructure, giving people electricity and water. So this is the moment that we have to say no more. And and I hope we don't go back to business as usual.
Yeah, I mean, you just talked about crimes against humanity during this juncture, but here we are. This is the second time, and the first being in 2022 during the Women Life Freedom Uprising. The UN fact-finding mission found that crimes against humanity were also committed then. So this is another level, a mass scale we haven't seen, as you noted earlier. You put some really good points out there, and I just wanted to hone in a bit on what the international community should be doing. They should be calling for a democratic state. The news cycle is slowly moving on, unfortunately. And when the news cycle moves on, that's when you start seeing mass executions. That's when you see that the crackdown might have stopped, not in the streets, but this is when it starts in a different way. So I think those are some things to emphasize. We've had Iranians for years, since Women Like Freedom, call for the IRGC, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to be designated by the United Kingdom and the European Union. So I think these are really simple things that Iranians inside Iran have been calling for years, and I think we need to pay attention to those voices. But
Can I interject and
Yeah.
say, like, I really appreciate the work you've done, Holly, in terms of like staying in touch, trying to really understand and represent authentic voices of Iranians. And I know you do a lot of work, and you do a lot of work because I know you want this regime to go and you want to free Iran. And I'd love to know a little bit about. I know you've done some really exceptional work on Gen Z in Iran. You're regularly published in the New York Times. Can you tell us a little bit about the authentic, like, Gen Z and like the future we can imagine that we're so inspired by this generation?
I'm going to make it as brief as possible because I also do want to get back to you to talk about a very important call to action. Yes, so I think Iranian Gen Z is extraordinary. They're the first generation, like everywhere else, that have been born with internet and social media. They have the same needs and wants as our children everywhere, and adults everywhere, young adults. They listen to the same music. They listen to K-pop, Taylor Swift. They watch Rick and Morty and Stranger Things. They dress like Gen Z, and they speak Persian with English slang. And they know they are very much in tune with what's happening in the world. And it's for that reason that they haven't been bowing down to the Islamic Republic. I would argue that the 2022 uprising was a Gen Z-led uprising. We've seen Gen Z uprisings around the world since, in Madagascar, in the Philippines, but it was the Iranian youth that led that starting in 2022. And so I think that they deserve a chance. They deserve that future they've been fighting for, literally risking their lives, knowing full well that they're going to be met with bullets and batons. So I just want to highlight that extraordinary bravery.
It's really important to highlight. I mean, we're talking about so much tragedy, but there's so much hope, and like imagining what a free Iran would look like with these extraordinary people.
They're incredible. Masa, I would love for you to talk a bit more about this call to action.
I'll try to do this briefly. So, I mean, it's all of you ladies, and it's really extraordinary to work with so many incredible Iranian women in the diaspora who we've been working together on so many different initiatives. And I mean, one of the things we have launched this week at Davos is a campaign. You can go check it out. It's direct2cell.org. It's a coalition of different human rights organizations, including ours. A lot of behind the scene work and advocacy by people like Holly. So we've seen the impact of Starlink satellite internet. Like Bahar said, it needs to be more accessible. Only very privileged people have it. And so Direct to Cell is a way that tries to use the existing technology in smartphones that have been built from 2020 to now to connect to Direct to Cell satellites in the sky. The technology exists. We just need to create the momentum for investment and technology companies to put the time and resources to deploy this for Iran and beyond.
I want to thank you both for joining Vital Voices live from Davos today. It's been really an honor to work with you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Vital Voices, and for allowing us the ability to amplify voices that can't be heard during this communications shutdown. And we hope you'll have us in the near future to hopefully talk about a free Iran.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
next time we talk should be about the free Iran.